Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Star here with you guys. Today we're going to be talking about perhaps the most famous ancient civilization, and that is ancient Egypt. And we're going to be talking a little bit about ancient Egypt. We'll get specifically then into kind of the role of the pharaoh or the king, and then we'll also talk about some of the kind of more well-known pharaohs during this time period as well. All right, so follow along, guys. Let's take a look at some of these pharaohs. We're going to start off first, though, by talking about the three different time periods that we look at when we talk about Egyptian history. We have the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. And we're talking about a long, long time ago. We're talking about before Common Era. That's what BCE stands for. And so when we look at that, we're talking about 2686 to 2181 BCE for the Old Kingdom. And if you look at that, 2686 happened way before the year 2181. So we are actually working our way up towards zero when we talk about before Common Era. All right. And so we look at the Old Kingdom. This is also known as the Age of the Pyramids. We see a lot of the first pyramids being built during this time. We'll take a look at a couple of those different pyramids today. You can see the picture on the right there, the Great Pyramids at Giza, also being built during this time as well. The Old Kingdom is also known for being a very stable time and somewhat a peaceful time because of the pharaohs who were in charge. They kept stable rule over the civilization of Egypt during that time period. Now, between the Old Kingdom and the Middle Kingdom, you can see there's a couple hundred years, same as between the Middle and the New Kingdom, couple hundred years. And during those couple hundred years, there's no unification, basically. Egypt is not being controlled. There's not stable rule during that time by one specific pharaoh or two specific pharaohs. We see kind of different shifts during that time and a little bit of infighting going on in the Egyptian civilization. But the Middle Kingdom begins around 1991 BCE. And runs to 1786, and they consider this to be the age of, or the period of reunification, where they are bringing the lower portion of Egypt and the upper portion of Egypt back under the power of one pharaoh. Only one person rules during that time period over the entire civilization of Egypt. And so because of that, and the stable rule that was had by that one person in charge, we see great achievements in literature, art, and architecture during that time period. Finally, we see the New Kingdom, and with the New Kingdom, we also call this Egypt's Golden Age. Whenever we talk about these civilizations here over the next couple of weeks, we'll talk about the civilization had a golden age, and we mean that during that time period, the civilization is having massive cultural achievements. So we see cultural achievements in art, literature, architecture, math, science, medicine, and we see all these great advancements and achievements happening during that time period. The New Kingdom is also classified as the leaders, the pharaohs during that time period, were usually concerned with conquest over other groups, expanding their territory of Egypt, and then we see a lot of monument construction going on during the New Kingdom as well. All right. Now, when we talk about the pharaoh themselves, the pharaoh had a specific role, actually a number of roles here in Egypt. Before anything else, though, the Egyptian people looked at the pharaoh as if he was a god here on earth. And so he had godlike powers in their mind. He was a religious leader, but he was also a governmental leader as well. And so we look at he was responsible for keeping kind of society in order and making sure that the people were protected from enemies and safe overall. The civilization was safeguarded from other groups. Typically, the pharaoh it was kind of an inherited position, so whoever the son was of the previous pharaoh would take over his role as the new ruler. And so they inherited the throne from father and son. But there are occasional women who also took on the role of pharaoh as well. We'll talk about perhaps maybe the most famous today a little later. Over time, they left behind a lot of great achievements, and that's what we're going to kind of focus on here as we move forward. Some of the achievements of some of the greater pharaohs that we are going to talk about. The first pharaoh that we're going to look into is the pharaoh Khufu. He is from the Old Kingdom. So he kind of presided over this age of pyramids, and he's most well known for building the Great Pyramid of Giza itself. So the actual pyramid that is dedicated to him is the one on the far right in the picture there. And if you take a look at that, yes, it doesn't look like it's as big, but that's because it's off in the distance. It is the largest of the three pyramids there, of the Great Pyramids. It's about 450 feet tall, 13 acres wide at the base, and it took more than 2 million yellow limestone blocks to build that pyramid. All right. Now, this complex itself, these three pyramids that were built, we also know the Sphinx is located there. You can see there's smaller pyramids in the area. It was a massive complex of tombs and monuments. It wasn't just the three pyramids there in the Sphinx. There was other areas, and it was this built-up area. We kind of saw that on the first slide as well, that there was what it would have looked like. We see all these other kind of complexes and tombs built around it as well. Khufu, the man who built this pyramid, is also known for ruling over a unified Egypt. He's one of the first to unify both Upper and Lower Egypt together, and he unified both of them and ruled over both of them while he was in power. His son and grandson are actually the two pharaohs that built the other two pyramids. So Khafre was his son and Menkaure was his grandson, and those other two pyramids are dedicated to them. Our next pharaoh we're going to look at is the pharaoh Dozier. He is also from the Old Kingdom, and he's known for basically a lot of great achievements, but he created the first pyramid, and we can take a look at that right there. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Dozier led Egypt through a lot of great achievements and advancements during his time in power, developed new agricultural methods, he increased the trade going on in Egypt, developed cities, and expanded the territory that he reigned over as well. Maybe his most famous thing that he's known for, though, is he brought an end to a very severe food shortage. There was a famine sweeping across Egypt for a number of years, and through the new agricultural techniques that they developed, it helped to bring food, obviously, back to the people. Now, there is a religious story that goes with it as well, being that he is a religious leader. The people looked at him for help, and he went to and basically built a temple to a god that he believed would help bring them the harvest and bring food back to the people. And so that's kind of the story that goes along with it. But we know that the agricultural techniques that they developed during that time are actually what bring the food back. All right. Now, that pyramid on the lower left there, that is the Step Pyramid of Saqqara. It is considered to be the world's, or I should say ancient Egypt's first pyramid. And you can see it's called the Step Pyramid because you've got kind of decreasing sizes of buildings built on top of each other there. Those buildings originally were called mastabas, and they just built one mastaba on top of another. This is considered to be the world's first stone building, and it was actually a famous Egyptian architect that built it. His name is Imhotep. All right, he does some of the other building here as well for some of the other pharaohs. Moving into the New Kingdom, we look at a very controversial pharaoh here, the pharaoh Akhenaten. He's also known as the pharaoh Amenhotep IV. And the reason he is controversial and why he has two names is because while he was in power, he changed his religion. And so he went from being a polytheistic leader like all of his other predecessors, and what ancient Egyptian people believe in is multiple gods, polytheism, to believing in just one God. And that God that he chose to worship was the god Aten. And so that god is the sun god. And so he is known for a lot of disputes with the people. People were very angry with him. A lot of controversy over the religion. He also leaves the capital city, and he builds his own capital city. He has a number of followers that join him with his monotheistic worship of the god Aten, which you can see he also changes his name to basically one who serves Aten. That's where he gets the name Akhenaten. And his followers destroyed statues of other Egyptian gods, which is one of the things that left a lot of other Egyptian people very angry with him and his followers. Now, when he ends up dying, the Egyptian people basically destroyed everything. You can see the remnants of his capital city on the right. That was in ruins and destroyed before the ravages of time here got to it. And so they destroyed the city. They even believe, a lot of historians and archaeologists believe, that they actually even destroyed his body after he died. They tried to basically erase his history because they wanted to go back to being polytheistic like they had been prior to this. They didn't like his religious beliefs. All right. Our next, staying in the New Kingdom, our next pharaoh here is one of my favorites. It is Hatshepsut. And she is one of the few female rulers that we see in Egypt. And so you might say, well, how did she gain control of the throne? Well, she ruled jointly as co-pharaoh with her half-brother. And when he died, his son, who would inherit the throne, would be the new pharaoh, was only 10 years old. And so she stayed on and worked with his son. And eventually she declared herself queen. She declared herself pharaoh. And so under her power, under her guidance here, Egypt also continued to flourish. She had a lot of economic gains while she was in power. She organized sea expeditions to other empires, specifically the Empire of Punt, and they were able to bring in trade items and goods that they were not able to get access to anywhere else in Egypt. And so Egypt benefited from her reign. Now, she has kind of a mysterious death, and we're not exactly sure what happens. In fact, we think she's probably murdered. And there is a really good video here, guys, that we're going to have you watch today when we're all done with this to take a look at. It's about 5 minutes long, and it talks about Hatshepsut and what happened to her and why we think this was probably murder. Okay. The last thing we can take a look at with Hatshepsut is her temple. She didn't build a pyramid. She built this temple right here while she was in power, and that temple is where she was buried. Obviously, it's the temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari, and it's cut right out of the cliffs itself. You can see it. Lots of different temples and shrines were inside that area. Lots of different statues, all dedicated to different gods in that shrine or that temple. Last but certainly not least, guys, we have perhaps the greatest of all of the Egyptian pharaohs, and that is Ramses II. Sometimes he's even called Ramses the Great. And like I said, he's considered probably the most important of all Egyptian pharaohs, partially because of how long he reigned. He reigned for 60, 70 years as king or as pharaoh. And so he lived into his 80s, which at that time was a very, very, very old age. All right. While he lived his 80 plus years on earth here, he had more than 100 wives and over 100 children as well. All right. So a lot of family building going on during that time period. We can see he also was known for constructing many building projects all throughout Egypt, and he was also a great military leader. He had a lot of military wins and accomplishments, but maybe the greatest is he helped to defeat the Hittites. You talked about and read a little bit about the Hittites the other day with the ancient civilizations chart, and they were a warlike people from Asia Minor, so just north of Egypt, and he was able to defeat them to the point where they would not threaten the survival of Egypt moving forward. And so we look at that as he defeated the Hittites and safeguarded his kingdom from them. If we look at the right there, lower right, we can see that's the temple of Ramses II at Abu Simbel. Again, a masterful piece of architecture here. Those statues in front, there's 4 statues. They're all the statues of Ramses, and they are all 65 feet tall, cut right into the cliff itself. Inside the temple, there's massive halls and pillars and statues as well. And maybe the most interesting thing about this temple, it was literally piece by piece cut apart and moved to the site it's at today, and that's because they built a new dam, the Aswan High Dam on the Nile River, and it actually was going to be flooded, and so they didn't want to lose the temple. They wanted to be able to move it. So they piece by piece cut the entire thing apart and moved it to a new location. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, those are the pharaohs that you need to know moving forward here, guys. We should have a quiz or a test, and there will be some information about those pharaohs right on there. If you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen, you can talk to me, you can talk to Mr. Moran, or you can talk to Miss Job. Have a good one. See you again.